Takeoff's mother is now publicly exposing his father for allegedly trying to get his hands on $26 million from an estate he had absolutely no part in building. And the legal battle that has erupted inside this family since Takeoff's death is one of the most shocking stories the hip-hop world has had to sit with. A woman who raised her son alone, who was there through every year of struggle before the fame and the money arrived, is now standing in a courtroom fighting off a man who reportedly was nowhere to be found during those years, but showed up the moment there was a fortune on the table. We have been watching this story closely, and what we can tell you is that the details go far deeper than what has been circulating on social media. The legal filings, the competing claims, the history between these two parents and their son, it all connects in ways that most people have not fully pieced together yet. And today we are laying out the entire picture for you. Because the truth behind what Takeoff's father is allegedly trying to pull, what his mother is doing to stop it, and what is actually at stake inside that $26 million estate is more disturbing than the headline suggests. And by the time this video is done, you are going to understand exactly how all of it went down. Yo, what is good, fam? Welcome back. If you are new here, this is where we break down the stories that matter to the culture. The real ones, the deep ones, the ones with layers that a tweet cannot capture. Today we are getting into the full story of Takeoff, his legacy, his fortune, and the family war that has broken out over everything he left behind. Let's get into it. Yo, what is good, fam? Welcome back. Today we are getting into the story of Kurznik Kari Ball, the man the world knew as Takeoff, 1/3 of Migos, one of the most technically gifted rappers of his generation, and a man who left behind a legacy and a fortune that is now at the center of a family battle that nobody saw coming. Let's start from the beginning, because the money does not make sense without the story, and the story does not make sense without understanding who this man really was. Takeoff was born on June 18, 1994 in Lawrenceville, Georgia, a suburb of Atlanta in Gwinnett County. He grew up in a household that included his uncle Quavius Marshall, who the world came to know as Quavo, and his cousin Kiari Cephas, better known as Offset, 3 young men from the same family tree, raised together, grinding together, dreaming together. And Takeoff was raised primarily by his mother, Titania Davenport. That is important. That is a detail we are going to come back to, because the story of who raised Takeoff, who was there during the years when nothing was guaranteed, is directly connected to everything happening in courtrooms right now. By middle school, Takeoff was already developing a feel for rhythm and music that was different from the kids around him. He was not the loudest person in the room, he was never the most talkative. But when it came to putting words together and riding a beat, he had something special that the people around him recognized early. In 2008, when Takeoff was just 14 years old, he and Quavo and Offset formed a group they initially called the Polo Club. They were teenagers with energy and ambition and a sound that was still raw but already their own. They renamed themselves Migos around 2010, and in August of 2011 released their first mixtape, Juke Season. It was not an overnight success. There was no viral moment that handed them everything. It was years of putting out projects, building a street reputation in Atlanta, and refusing to quit even when the industry was not paying attention. The breakthrough moment that started turning heads on a wider scale came in 2013 with the release of a single called Versace. That record, built on a hypnotic loop and delivered in the triplet flow cadence that would become Migos' signature sound, caught the attention of Drake. Drake jumped on the remix, and suddenly a record that was already moving in the culture went to an entirely different level. For people who were not deep in Atlanta rap at the time, Versace was the introduction to something that felt unlike anything else on radio or in the streaming landscape, that triplet flow. The staccato bouncing delivery where syllables are stacked in tight 3-note bursts was not invented by Migos, but they perfected it, popularized it, and made it the dominant vocal pattern of an entire era of hip-hop. Artists across every corner of rap eventually adopted some version of it. Producers started building beats designed for it, and it all traces back to 3 young men from Gwinnett County who were not supposed to make it by anyone's early estimation. Their debut studio album, Young Rich Nation, dropped in July of 2015. Then came the record that changed everything. In January of 2017, Migos released Culture, and it debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200. The lead single was Bad and Bougé featuring Lil Uzi Vert, and that song went to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. It was everywhere. It became a cultural phenomenon almost immediately. Memed into infinity, referenced on television, quoted by celebrities, played at every party, in every city, on every playlist. Bad and Boujee went on to be certified 4 times platinum and became one of the defining records of that entire moment in popular music. Culture was followed by Culture 2 in January 2018 and Culture 3 in June 2021, cementing Migos as one of the most consistent and commercially dominant groups hip-hop had seen in years. But within the group, the real fans always had a particular appreciation for Takeoff. He was the quiet one, the understated one. He rarely dominated interviews, rarely courted controversy, rarely made himself the center of attention outside of his music. But on the records, on the actual songs, Takeoff was frequently the one whose verse made people rewind. His technical precision, his sense of timing, his ability to lock into a flow and sustain it with consistency and creativity. These were qualities that set him apart even within a group of 3 genuinely talented artists. There was a running conversation in hip-hop circles about Takeoff being the most slept-on member of Migos despite being arguably the most technically skilled. And Takeoff himself was aware of that dynamic. In an interview on the Drink Champs podcast recorded just days before his death, he said something that has haunted the culture ever since. He said he wanted his flowers while he was still here. He did not want to wait for people to celebrate him after he was gone. Those words hit different now in a way that is almost impossible to sit with. In 2018, Takeoff also proved he could stand alone when he released his debut solo album, The Last Rocket. That project debuted at number 4 on the Billboard 200 and was celebrated by fans and critics as the clearest demonstration yet of what Takeoff could do without the group framework. He and Quavo later recorded together as a duo called Unk and Few, expanding further and showing that there was more runway ahead for both of them individually. Takeoff's trajectory was still going up, there was more music coming, more chapters to be written. And then on November 1st, 2022, at 810 Billiards and Bowling in Houston, Texas, Takeoff was shot and killed. He was 28 years old.
Breaking news out of Texas, where a member of the rap group Migos was fatally shot. What we are hearing is that it was 28-year-old Takeoff who was shot at a private party. This all happening at a bowling alley. We do have some video of the scene, and then the rapper was shot. We are hearing that he may have been shot in his head or near his head. He was actually pronounced dead on the scene.
The music industry went quiet with grief. Artists from Drake to Eazy-A to Machine Gun Kelly paid tribute publicly. His funeral was held at Atlanta's State Farm Arena, a massive venue filled with family, friends, fans, and fellow artists who came to say goodbye to someone the culture was not ready to lose. A man who had asked for his flowers while he was here and who deserved every single one of them. Now let's talk about the money, because this is where the story shifts and becomes the situation we are all watching right now. At the time of his passing, Takeoff had an estimated net worth of approximately $26 million. That figure has been widely reported across multiple outlets and is the number that has been referenced in the legal proceedings surrounding his estate. To understand why that number exists and what it actually represents, you have to understand how wealth gets built at the level Migos was operating. The biggest single source of income for Migos during their peak years was touring. Between September 2017 and September 2018, Migos earned a combined $25 million, generated largely by a schedule that had them performing 93 shows in 12 months. That same period included the Aubrey and the Three Migos tour with Drake, which grossed over $103 million across 54 shows. By this point, according to Forbes, Migos was commanding upwards of $150,000 per tour stop. When you consider that they were performing nearly twice a week for an entire year, the math becomes staggering. Between September 2018 and September 2019, the group's earnings climbed further to $36 million. 2 years, $61 million combined. Assuming the members split earnings roughly equally, each one of them was taking home somewhere in the range of $20 million across just those 2 years. Then there is streaming. Migos was one of the most streamed acts on the planet during their peak. In that same 2017 to 2018 period, they accumulated 4 billion streams. 4 billion. The per-stream rate on platforms like Spotify and Apple Music is small when you look at it individually. But when you are stacking 4 billion streams in a single year, the royalty income becomes enormous, and it keeps coming every single month as long as people keep listening. And people keep listening. Bad and Boujee, T-Shirt, Walk It, Talk It, Motorsport, Stir Fry. These are not songs that disappeared from playlists. They are catalog staples that generate ongoing income continuously. On top of touring and streaming, Migos built significant income through brand endorsements and partnerships. Beats by Dr. Mountain Dew, Champs Sports, Finish Line, Avian Jewelers, and a management deal structure that, after they left 300 Entertainment in 2015 to move exclusively under Quality Control Music, significantly increased their per-show earnings from around $30,000 to $40,000 a night to upwards of $60,000 and eventually the $150,000 figure that Forbes reported. Takeoff also personally launched an NFT collection called Apes in Space that sold out 10,000 units within a single week. The man was not just earning, he was building. But here is the thing that most people outside of the music business do not fully appreciate, and this is crucial for understanding why the estate dispute is as serious as it is. The most valuable thing Takeoff left behind is not cash sitting in a bank account. It is his music catalog, his share of the master recordings, his publishing rights, his stake in the Migos collective output, and his solo work. These are assets that do not expire. Every single time a Migos song is streamed anywhere in the world, royalties are generated. Every time Bad and Boujee gets licensed for a film, a television show, a commercial, or a video game, a synchronization fee is paid to the estate. Every time a song is played on radio or in a public venue, performance rights royalties are collected. This income does not stop because the artist passed away. In many cases, tragically, it actually increases after a beloved artist dies because of the surge in streaming that always follows. Takeoff's catalog is a financial engine that will keep running for decades. Whoever controls that estate controls the engine. And that is exactly what is now at the center of this legal battle. So now let's get into it. The actual situation, the reason this video exists. When Takeoff died on November 1st, 2022, he died intestate. That is the legal term for dying without a will. No documented instructions for how his assets should be distributed. No named beneficiaries, no executor designated to manage the estate, nothing. At 28 years old, with $26 million built and a music catalog worth far more over time, Takeoff left no legal roadmap for what should happen to any of it after he was gone. And in the absence of that roadmap, the state of Georgia stepped in with its own rules. Under Georgia's interstate succession law, when a person dies without a will, without a spouse, and without children, the estate passes to the next of kin. In Takeoff's case, that means his parents. His mother, Titania Davenport, and his biological father, Kenneth M. Ball. That is where this story begins to get complicated. Titania Davenport, Takeoff's mother, the woman who raised him, moved to take legal action in connection with her son's estate and his death. In June of 2023, she filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the owners of 810 Billiards and Bowling, the venue where Takeoff was shot and killed. The lawsuit alleged that the venue's owners failed to provide proper and adequate security for the event that night. It claimed there were no screening mechanisms at the door, no after-hour controls or security measures, and no enforcement of rules or industry standards to protect the guests at that event. The lawsuit further alleged that the venue's owners knew or should have known about a significant number of violent crimes that had occurred in and around that location, and that they failed to take reasonable action in response to that known risk. Titania Davenport was seeking more than $1 million in damages from the venue and the various LLCs connected to its ownership and management. That lawsuit on its own is a significant legal undertaking representing a mother's attempt to hold accountable the people she believes failed to protect her son the night he was killed. But then Kenneth Ball entered the picture, and that is where this entire situation became what it is today. According to reporting from All Hip Hop, Bossip, Hip Hop DX, and Complex, among other outlets that track the legal filings, Takeoff's father, Kenneth M. Ball, moved to join the wrongful death lawsuit as a third-party intervener. In legal terms, an intervener is someone who is not directly named in an existing lawsuit but who claims a personal stake in the outcome and seeks to formally join the proceedings. Ball's legal team argued that he too had suffered substantial pecuniary loss as a result of his son's death. His attorneys were quoted saying that Kenneth Ball, as the natural parent of Takeoff, had suffered substantial past and future pecuniary loss, including funeral and burial expenses, psychological and psychiatric expenses, loss of advice, loss of counsel, loss of services, loss of care, loss of maintenance, and loss of support. Ball reportedly sought at least $1 million in damages from the bowling alley as well, mirroring the amount his mother had already claimed. And this is exactly the moment where Takeoff's mother drew the line, because from where she is standing, And from where a lot of people in the culture are standing alongside her, this is not a grieving father stepping forward to seek justice for his son. This is someone attempting to collect from a legacy he was not present for, a man who reportedly was nowhere to be found during the years of struggle, during the years of grinding, during the years when Titania Davenport was holding things together on her own, and who is now showing up in a courtroom with attorneys and legal filings the moment $26 million entered the conversation. Takeoff's mother is reportedly making sure the world understands exactly what she believes is happening here. She is not staying quiet. She is not letting the narrative be controlled by legal language and procedural filings alone. In the eyes of the people closest to Takeoff, what his father is doing has a name. And that name is not grief. That name is opportunism. And Titania Davenport, by all accounts, is fighting back. And fam, here is the thing that has the culture reacting the way it has been reacting. Multiple reports, from The Source, from Hip Hop Wired, from Madame Noir, from outlets that have been covering this situation closely, have highlighted that there are competing and conflicting accounts of what Kenneth Ball's actual involvement in Takeoff's life looked like during the years when Takeoff was growing up and grinding. By multiple documented accounts, Takeoff was raised primarily in a single-parent household by his mother. Some sources have indicated that Takeoff himself acknowledged being mainly raised by his mother, with the broader family unit, including Quavo's side of the family, serving as the primary support structure during his formative years. Both sides are reportedly contesting the question of just how actively involved Ball was in his son's life before the money arrived. And that question, the question of who was there during the hard years, is not just emotional, it is legally relevant in the context of who should benefit from the legacy that was built during those hard years. Under Georgia law, the biological connection is what establishes inheritance rights in an intestate situation. The courts are not typically in the business of weighing whether a parent was emotionally present or financially supportive when determining who is a legal next of kin. The law looks at biology, at documentation, at statutory definitions of family relationship, and that creates the core tension at the heart of this story. What feels morally right and what the law says is legally permissible are not always the same thing. Titania Davenport raised this man. She was there. By all accounts, she sacrificed and invested and believed in her son before anyone else did. But under Georgia's intestate succession framework, Kenneth Ball's biological claim to a portion of that estate exists regardless of the personal history between him and his son. The exact division of the $26 million estate and the ongoing royalty income from the music catalog has reportedly not been finalized. What has been reported is that both parents are actively involved in legal proceedings connected to the estate, that the situation between them is contentious and complicated by a reportedly long-standing breakdown in their relationship, and that the question of who controls and benefits from everything Takeoff left behind remains an ongoing legal matter. The bowling alley's owners, for their part, have pushed back on the wrongful death claims, with their legal team reportedly moving to dismiss the suit and attributing responsibility to the event attendees rather than the venue itself. Now let me take a step back for a second and give you the broader context here, because what is happening with Takeoff's estate is not unique to his story. It is part of a pattern that keeps repeating in the music industry and has been repeating for decades. When a major artist dies without a will, the legal and financial aftermath is almost always complicated, expensive, and drawn out. Prince died in 2016 without a will despite being worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and the legal proceedings over his estate dragged on for years, consuming enormous resources in attorney fees and court costs while his catalog sat in a kind of financial limbo. Aretha Franklin died in 2018 without a formal will, and her family spent years in court working through competing claims and handwritten documents that may or may not have constituted legal instructions. Even Nipsey Hussle, who was famously outspoken about financial literacy and generational wealth building, had estate complications arise after his death in 2019 despite having done more legal preparation than many artists at his level. The point is that estate disputes in the music industry are almost expected when a young, high-earning artist passes suddenly without the legal infrastructure to govern the transition of their wealth. And the music industry specifically creates a kind of financial complexity that most other industries do not. When a tech entrepreneur or a business owner passes away, the assets are largely fixed. Company equity, real estate, cash accounts, investment portfolios. You can look at them, assess them, divide them with relative clarity. When a musician passes away, the most valuable assets are living, breathing income streams that are constantly generating revenue and constantly fluctuating in value based on cultural relevance, licensing activity, streaming trends, and market conditions. The music catalog is not a static pile of money. It is a dynamic business that requires active management, legal oversight, and strategic decision-making. Someone has to approve licensing deals. Someone has to negotiate with streaming platforms. Someone has to decide whether to release archival material or collaborate with other artists on posthumous projects. These decisions have enormous financial implications, and they require someone with both the legal authority and the right judgment to make them well. That is precisely why control of the estate, not just a share of the money, but the actual administrative authority over how the estate is managed, is so fiercely contested. Because whoever sits in that seat is not just receiving royalty checks, they are steering the ship. They are making decisions that will shape how Takeoff's name and music are presented to the world for decades to come. And for Titania Davenport, who raised her son and watched him build his entire legacy, the idea of someone else sitting in that seat, especially someone whose presence during her son's lifetime is itself disputed, is reportedly something she is not willing to accept without a fight. Fans online have been very vocal about where they stand. In comment sections and on social media, the sentiment has largely leaned toward Titania Davenport, toward the mother who was there. People have pointed out the irony and the pain of a father who reportedly was not a consistent presence during Takeoff's life now stepping forward when there is $26 million and a music catalog on the table. Others have noted more dispassionately that regardless of the emotional dimension of the situation, the legal framework is what it is, and that is the arena where this will ultimately be resolved. Both of those perspectives reflect something true. The emotional truth of this story and the legal reality of this story are two different things, and they are not always aligned. What this situation also highlights, in a way that cuts across the specific details of this family's experience, is the critical importance of estate planning for anyone who is building serious wealth. Takeoff was 28 when he died. At 28, most people are not spending their evenings working with estate attorneys on wills and trusts and beneficiary designations. But Takeoff was not most people. By the time he was in his mid-20s, he had earned more money than the vast majority of people will see in an entire lifetime. He had a music catalog generating continuous income. He had publishing rights and royalty streams and business interests. All of that needed a legal home, a set of documented instructions that would govern what happened to it when he was no longer here to manage it. The absence of that documentation is what created the opening for the legal battle that is now unfolding. Music industry attorneys and financial advisors who speak publicly about these issues are consistent in their advice. A will alone is not always sufficient for artists at this level. What is typically recommended is a comprehensive estate plan that includes a will, yes, but also trusts designed to manage ongoing income, clearly designated beneficiaries for specific assets, a named executor or administrator who understands the music business, and updated beneficiary designations on all financial accounts and insurance policies. The goal is to create a legal architecture around the wealth that is airtight enough to survive the artist's death without becoming a source of conflict and litigation. It costs money and time to put that architecture in place, but it costs significantly more in money, in time, in emotional damage, in attorney fees, and in family relationships. When that architecture does not exist and the courts have to build one retroactively, and through all of this, through every legal filing and every court date and every headline about estate disputes and family conflict, the music keeps playing. Bad and Bougie is still on playlists. The Last Rocket is still being streamed. Takeoff's verses on Migos records are still being quoted and referenced and celebrated by fans who loved him then and love him now. The legacy is intact. The art is untouchable. Whatever happens in those courtrooms cannot reach the actual music, cannot diminish what Takeoff created or the impact he had on hip-hop culture. That part is permanent. But the financial dimension of his legacy, the catalog, the royalties, the publishing rights, the ongoing income streams tied to everything he recorded, that part is very much in motion. And how it ultimately gets resolved will determine who benefits from Takeoff's work for the years and decades ahead. It will determine whether his mother, who raised him and stood by him and watched him become who he became, is the one who gets to steward that legacy going forward, or whether a legal process built on statutory definitions and biological relationships produces a different outcome. That is the real weight of this story. That is why the culture is paying attention. Not just because of the numbers, not just because of the legal drama, but because at the center of all of it is a man who deserved his flowers while he was here, who never got enough of them, and whose memory now deserves to be protected and honored by the people and the systems that claim to speak for him. What do you think about the situation surrounding Takeoff's estate, and who should have control of his legacy? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and tap in with the content on screen for more stories like this one. We will see you next time, fam.